say just the dumbest thing that is just so hypocritical and backwards, and it's just like, that's not what you just said a week ago. Like, I can't take any of these people seriously, and I don't know what that means long term. I really don't.
Yeah.
But this is just another reason why I don't think I could ever get into politics. And I've been asked to, and it's just I don't think I really ever could. It's such a slow,
knowing
painful...
knowing you, I would even argue could or should. So let's take a minute here. I'm somebody who looks at the things you've done, and then the people who've helped you do them, as a real example for how to change the world you live in more effectively than if you were in politics. So run us through right now. I think this is a good opportunity to run through right now a couple of the court cases that you've had direct influence on, and why it's such a big deal.
So obviously our court cases and the 9 hearings that we've been through, we did hold a meeting for mask mandates in late 2021.
Your court case, define that in 30 seconds of what it accomplished and what you're going to accomplish with it.
It knocked down the state and local health directors' power to, quote, limit the gathering of people for any purpose and may establish procedures. So that has been ruled unconstitutional by a local court.
Yep.
And then the Court of Appeals has also basically upheld that ruling. Not upheld it, but a very similar ruling saying that it's unconstitutional. It violates separation of powers. And then we've continued an appeal for more of the local statutes.
Correct.
They're state health laws, but they enable the local health director.
Perfect. So if you get the local health director, essentially what happened during COVID can no longer happen after those 30 days.
So the day after I notified our local health officer that I was going to reopen the Iron Pig for dine-in service, they were here 20 minutes after I opened with a cease and desist order. And on that C&D was 3 or 4 different state statutes that they used, enabling Lisa Peacock to issue a cease and desist order.
Right.
That is ultimately what undid the local statute. All they had to do was put the state statute in. But no. They had to go even further and say, I have the power.
Right.
Sounds like He-Man. I have the power to shut you down locally.
I haven't thought about He-Man in a long time.
He-Man, right?
Yeah.
I'm surprised they haven't made a live action of that one yet. But so there's that, right? And that's continuing. We actually filed a bypass application because we're on the docket in Court of Appeals for this one. And then we filed a bypass application to right up to the Michigan Supreme Court.
Right.
So that's sitting there.
So I mean, let's put this in context here. What you did was essentially take something that, how many restaurants are in Michigan? Roughly 14, 15,000, 20,000?
I don't even know. Yeah, okay. Something like that.
Some ridiculous amount of restaurants. This one restaurant, and Ian and his team were able to take something that affected all of them and millions of restaurant goers, right? And now that never can happen again.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't think...
in a matter of 2 years.
Right. I don't...
Less than 2 years.
A politician couldn't do that.
No. So I don't even think a citizen-led petition drive.
No.
Right? So the one thing that we did see our legislature do was they removed from the Constitution the Emergency Powers of the Governor Act, which the Michigan Supreme Court ruled is unconstitutional October 2020.
But then she just used all these local things to get through everything
3 days,
she wanted
less than
to do.
3 days later, she went to the health department.
They, whatever.
Right.
We'll give them all a bunch of pronouns.
Them people. So there's that. So we have our stuff that's going on.
They could perform at the Olympics.
Right. Don't even get me started on that, please. This is where we live in. So there's that. So we have our
stuff.
Good for Paris. Which is going after the health department, state and local.
Yes.
And introducing an amazing argument called the vesting clauses argument, which is really simple argument that says our Michigan Constitution specifically says you cannot delegate power to another branch. The power to write law is vested in the legislature.
Which is elected people.
Which is elected
you
people.
You can't designate it to unelected people to then create or enforce law, correct?
Right. The power to enforce is vested in the executive branch. Again, elected. Right?
Always elected.
The judicial branch is vested with interpreting the laws passed by. And again, those people are elected.
Yep.
So we went through all this process in the executive branch and administrative agencies, getting beat to hell, losing our way to the top. Once we got out and were able to appeal, we got into our local court and got one of the first favorable rulings. Technically, the first favorable ruling came with Judge Kennedy.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, he was the guy down in Lansing, the judge that famously said, I saw the Iron Pig slogan, risk it for the brisket.
Yeah.
I like that. If time were no object, I would get the transcripts, and I had wished there was a few hearings I didn't record externally, and I wish I had, because they removed that video from YouTube instantly.
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful.
And that would have been one of the greatest
we need to get
sound bites ever. Besides the one where the health department had to admit on the record that they had 0 cases of COVID and 0 cases of even contact tracing at the Iron Pig for 3 years.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Go figure.
So Iron Pig, we've got stuff going against the
what you've done,
local health department.
You also were instrumental in the Let Them Breathe.
So the
Take
local
masks
health department
off kids.
Using state statute, put masks back on your kids
in school. That 2021 fall semester?
That was fall of 21.
Yeah, right? 2020 or 2020. Fall of 2020.
No.
Fall of 2021. That's right.
It was 21.
They kept it going.
It was 21.
Holy smokes.
So Let Them Breathe was a group of parents.
I remember
locally
this. Yes. I remember that meeting.
And sued. Yes. We filled up the Iron Pig with a bunch of pissed off parents.
Yeah. A bunch of moms.
Really what they were pissed off about was not so much the masking necessarily. What they were pissed off about was they had a plan.
Yeah.
The superintendent and the health department had come together and said, we're going to give the parents choices.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 days, 3 days over the holiday weekend before the first day of school, the health department came in and said, sorry, schools, we're going to require masking.
This. Yes.
No choices, masking. And then we had student walkouts, and the cops were called, and all this crazy stuff that ensued. And out of this came the Let Them Breathe lawsuit, which I believe is also sitting before the Michigan Supreme Court on appeal as
David,
well. My same attorney. Yep. There is a little-known case over in Traverse City, Studio 8 Hair Lab.
Yeah.
Last summer, took to her Facebook page and pronounced that if you identify as anything other than a man or a woman, and if you want to be called by a pet name, you should seek services from a pet groomer.
Yeah.
And that got all sorts of people upset.
I'm sure it did.
Again, not necessarily something I would use my business page for, but she was reacting to legislative language that was going to try and basically criminalize misgendering somebody.
I see. So if you're in a store and you think somebody looks like a girl and you call them a girl, but they're really trying to become a he,
right,
and you misgender them,
right,
by saying, "Hey, sir,
right,
can I?" Got it.
So
that could be criminal.
That blew up on social media. It was picked up by some major news outlets. Her local state representative said some really nasty things. The city of Traverse City came after her because I guess they have an ordinance against it.
Yeah.
3 people ended up filing civil rights complaints against this person over in Traverse City for a Facebook post.
Wow.
Now, She never said she was going to deny anybody services, and she never did physically deny services. She just asserted her First Amendment right. First, freedom of religion.
Yeah.
And her freedom of speech. They're kind of together, right?
Sure.
So what ended up happening is these people filed civil rights complaints against a business owner in Traverse City for writing something on Facebook.
Yeah.
Saying, if you identify as a dog, I'm sorry, I'm simply just going to call you Hey You. And if you don't like it, then you can go get your hair cut at a pet groomer. There's more. The post is a little bit longer than that, but that's what these people took exception with.
Sure.
Filed civil rights complaints against her and sought monetary damages and sought to close this person's business because she typed words onto a social media account that they scrolled past and read.
All right. It's not they were customers. They weren't even there.
They were never customers.
They just saw it.
These three individuals claim to be of non-binary whatever, and I'm not trying to pick on them. This is literally what it said. I've read the civil rights complaints, and if you look at the civil rights law, it says you cannot discriminate against a man or a woman, based on sex. Sex is defined as man or woman. You can't discriminate on religion. These other things. Non-binary is not part of that.
No, really.
So they went through some things, and again, my attorney represents Christine over there.
Yeah,
and they've gone through the ringer and trying to circumvent going through administrative court in the civil rights department, because we know how that goes.
Yeah,
they just roll you through the ringer. But the fact that people filed civil rights complaints for something that they willfully read on social media blows my mind. This is the time that we live in.
I know.
So I can't take any of these people seriously. Meanwhile, the Civil Rights Department actually has a very good purpose.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is the average response time for civil rights complaints is, I think, 16 to 18 months. Do you know how quickly they responded to these three civil rights complaints? Weeks.
Jeez.
Weeks. So they put legitimate civil rights complaints. Discriminating in housing is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Discrimination in the workplace is another
big one.
Mainly based on race.
Yeah.
Right? These ding-dongs saw this thing and was like, oh my God, they're attacking the LGBT community. We're going to make an example.
Yeah.
And I know what that's like.
Yeah, you do.
I got the biggest license suspension of anybody in the state for keeping open.
Oh.
I sold more soda than I ever have in our existence. But so that's free speech.
I love this.
Right? Free speech. And it's an affront on another executive branch agency.
And this whole conversation came, and it's exactly what I think when you and I started talking about this back in 2020, and you'd come into my office and I could just see what you were going through, and I was going through it similarly in my organization because we had a big event, and we tried to stay open, we couldn't because ultimately our venue was on a property that shut down. Going through all this, I think I bring all of this up because I really want people watching right now to understand, most of the people watching today, now hopefully in years to come, it's thousands and thousands of people watching Ian's podcast, but I want people to understand that this isn't like what has happened right now with this lawsuit with you, and then your now influence and this kind of group you're building or have built because of this, is having impact statewide and setting a precedence and having more influence over local policies and or state policies than you could have ever had serving in politics. And I don't think everybody's that way, right? I don't think everybody has that unique skill set that you do and the unique position. And sometimes it's for such a time as this, right? But this is awesome. And this is why I'm excited to always come on the podcast with you. I'm excited. I mean, this time I was the one who's like, dude, we got to do a podcast. There's like too much happening in the world. We got to talk about it. But man, awesome job. I'm pumped. I'm pumped to see where things are heading for you. And I think we need to keep up to date more right now.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I think between now and the election, it is going to be crazy town.
The next one that we're looking at is a solar farm right here in Hayes Township. Right,
you were telling me about that before.
In our county.
Yeah.
There's a company out of Austin, Texas, that is pressuring some adjacent property owners to sign easement setback agreements. Basically, nearly daily are they emailing these property owners trying to get them to sign these agreements.
Okay, so first though, tell me why this isn't because I think we've all been brainwashed by Hallmark Channel that the developers are bad people and the farm owners are good people, and that's just it.
There is
right?
nothing farmy about a solar farm or a wind farm.
So talk to me about why is this? What's going on here that makes this different from your typical, the stereotypical developer coming in and pushes away into make a neighborhood?
Well, so there's a couple of different ways to look at it, but for me, what got me interested in this whole thing to begin with was the idea that we have a green future, and that green future involves solar and wind power.
Yep.
And very little nuclear power. Right.
Yep.
And doing away with coal and hydroelectric and these others, right?
Yep.
So I vehemently disagree with large-scale wind and solar specifically, right? I'm a libertarian. I'm actually saying I'm a small L libertarian now.
Time out. What's that mean?
Just means even I don't like the libertarian label anymore.
Right. Okay.
That's a whole other different conversation.
Okay.
But along the same tenets, right? Personal responsibility.
Okay. Yeah.
You if you want a personal wind turbine generator on your home and sell your excess power back to the power grid, 100%.
Yeah.
That should be a thing.
Sure.
Right?
A lot
I'm
of Dutch
okay with
people
that.
probably like to do
solar
that.
panels on your home. Do the same thing. You can
Yeah.
sell. I'm okay with that. But at scale, even I see these memes going around where it's like, oh, let's put solar panels on top of parking garages and this, that, and the other. No. At scale, they are a huge environmental disaster.
Interesting.
From beginning to end.
Wow.
The minerals, the chemicals that go into photovoltaic cells, their end of life cycle is a third of what they claim. We have no way of getting rid of these things. We're basically putting them in the ground, hoping we can come up with some kind of something to do with them in the future.
Wow.
And this is just scratching the surface. The other part of it that I vehemently disagree with is the amount of carbon monoxide that is required to make photovoltaic cells, which is the entire reason this whole green energy agenda is even talked about, right? So it's hypocritical for environmentalists to be pushing solar panels when they are the antithesis of
green.
Child labor. Have you ever seen a strip mine? No. Do you know where these compounds and chemicals come from?
Not a chance, no.
Not America.
Jeez.
Right? So there's a lot of issues.
Wow.
Then they break. We get a hailstorm. There's a huge hailstorm in Texas last month.
Yeah, they're gone.
These chemicals spill out onto the ground, right? Then they're leaching into the ground. And this is what these homeowners are afraid of, is not just the environmental impact, but the wildlife impact and the impact on their property.
Yeah, property value
Specifically,
too, right?
I've had conversations with a couple that just moved here a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And they love the area, and now they're afraid that their property, in one of the boomingest real estate economies we've seen, they're afraid that their property value in less than 2 years is going to go down because a solar farm is going to be developed next door.
So what's the play? Why? So if it's not actually good for the environment, so is this just a way to get us off of oil?
Follow the money.
So run us and me through that real quick.
There's 250, it might be less than that, but there's millions of dollars of federal infrastructure dollars coming into Michigan for these projects alone.
Got it.
Just for green. That's not talking about battery plants. And there's also a battery storage facility also proposed over there in Hayes Township, which nobody is really talking about because I think they're trying to sneak it through. And that's why I think this RWE LLC, Green Energy LLC or whatever from Austin, is trying to get these setback agreements signed. before they go to get the special use permit,
Sure.
and it gets really out. I mean, it is already out because Hayes Township residents jam-packed their last meeting, and we're like, we don't want it. But the township says, listen, this is going to be the number one generator of property tax here. And then the residents say, well, it's not zoned commercial.
Exactly.
It's not.
So they're going to have to make an exemption.
So they may have to go to the zoning board, or they're going to have to get a special use. So I'm advocating now that these people start talking to your county commissioners, go to the ZBA zoning board meetings, get this special use denied. Beautiful. There's 2 property owners that would benefit from this lease.
Yeah.
And of course, the company says, well, there's nothing to stop those property owners from still farming any areas that we don't put panels on. So it should be still agriculture.
Oh my
instead of commercial.
Yeah,
so
of course.
This, again, then one step further, Governor Whitmer signed a law giving the Michigan Public Service Commission basically free reign on these projects. So let's say that, so they're the ones that come in and have anything to say about a nuclear or a dam or a solar project or wind project. Centralized power is never a good thing, right? This is one of the tenets of being a libertarian, is decentralize everything, especially banking. But what they want to do is take that power from the local, from you and me and the Hayes Township residents, and say, no, we know better than you as a commission, unelected, executive branch agency. This is why this falls into my arena again. Liquor Commission, Health Department, Department of Agriculture.
It's all the same.
Right? Civil Rights Department, Michigan's Public Service Commission. All of these executive branch agencies have had this enormous power that have just drove this state into the ground. And it's been under both parties'
and Democrat
leadership, right? So both have to take some responsibility. Neither 100%. Will, but this is how we start to undo that. And then Supreme Court rulings from the last 2 weeks have bolstered our arguments. And
Michigan Supreme Court, right?
No, SCOTUS. Wow. So the Chevron deference was overturned, which in a nutshell said judges have to give deference to the agency.
Deference means what?
Deference meaning basically we're going to side with the agency that created the rule, because they're pretty well intended.
Got it.
Right? And we saw that with 2253, may limit the gathering of people for any purpose and may establish procedures. Led to sign-in sheets, curfews, 12 people in your home during Thanksgiving, 6 feet. All of these crazy things. Right? That extrapolation. So Chevron now removes that. Now a judge doesn't have to say, or in his ruling say, well, I mean, I gotta defer to the agency on this one because they're the experts. No, I can now bring in my own experts. Doesn't mean the judge necessarily is going to listen to them, but I at least get to.
I get it.
Right. Definitely. The other one that is even bigger is a case called Jarcasey. And Jarcasey, what that says is, again, administrative court proceedings are all in the executive branch, right? There is no jury of my peers like there is in the judicial branch, which is, by the way, one of the 27 grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence. So when I went to the Liquor Commission in my hearings, administrative court hearings, it was up to the judge. I mean, I can argue and we can present evidence, but the judge has to go deference to the agency. And I don't get a jury of my peers. So the scale is weighted in favor of the agency. And this is why things have gotten so out of control, not just in our state, but in our country, with the SEC, the FEC, the FDA, all of these, the FBI, the Attorney General, all of these executive branch agencies have so much power. Secret Service, right? All of these executive branch agencies now have to have a come to Jesus moment in the next few years, because their world's about to be turned upside down.
That's amazing.
And it levels the playing field for little guys like me. To speak nothing of the intrinsic corruption that happens when oh, I don't know, somebody that was working for the FDA then goes to work for a company creating opioid drugs.
Right. Whoa, dude.
That then has a play in creating the legislation around the drug.
Yep.
So this very incestuous relationship can now be broken.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's huge. And people are really talking about the Chevron, but not a lot of people are talking about the Jerkesi part, the jury trial. The jury trial.
So that brings the jury back into it, and it levels everything.
So instead of me sitting in front of the liquor commission judge,
it's massive.
I can actually get a jury of my peers from my community.
Correct, yeah.
And it may have been the same outcome, but at least it's people from my community. It's not some jerk off from Lansing who's appointed, right? Those administrative judges aren't even elected. They're appointed. You know who they're appointed by?
Yep, the people that want them to be there. Yep. So they're always going to, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it really
Dude, my mind's blown right now.
Really starts to level the playing field for cases like mine. And I mean,
that's
much bigger
huge.
Case. It's a big deal.
No wonder Biden's going nuts over the Supreme Court right now.
Exactly.
He's trying to completely blow it up.
But that's the rhetoric that they have to ratchet up. I mean, even with overturning of Roe, with the Dobbs decision, right? I mean, the emotional arguments that were made is, they want to make abortion illegal. Read the decisions.
Yep.
And they say we're returning it to the
states.
The states are the incubators.
Yep.
That's how it's always been, right? And if you don't like it, then get a proposition out there. Get a petition going, right? That's what they did here in Michigan. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it's a little nutty, but that's what the people voted for, and that is what is now in our Constitution. Yeah. And if we want to change it, I think they've got to do something drastic to try and change it.
Right.
But that's how the Founding Fathers intended it, and some of those people are really pissed off that all of this power is now being given back to the people. Yeah. Or to people like me and small corporations that go into these things against governments that have so much money. I mean, my case alone, they said the attorney's fees, so it was over $70,000 for the Let Them Breathe. That was nothing. They had a third of the hearings that we did. I think they've estimated all the AG's fees and stuff at like $278,000 or $280,000
with taxpayer money just to come at you.
Yeah, and here we are 4 years later. It's just like So, anyways, I digress.
That was a good digress, though, because I think out of everything that we've been talking, as far as the most content, that had a ton of content in it that I think is unique to this podcast. I think is unique to this discussion and unique to you. That you just can't hear that perspective or opinion or experience anywhere else. And so that was pretty sweet.
And the other thing, too, is that I already know, and I'm already seeing it, I'm already hearing about it, since I have just put out feelers talking to some people. They've reached out to me and said they're proposing one here, they're proposing one there, they're proposing one here.
Solar farms?
Solar farms.
Got it.
Because, of Whitmer's agenda.
Yeah, she's got a bunch of money to throw at it.
And then the federal infrastructure dollars are going to start already flowing in.
Well, where that money is, it's free money for that business to just go fulfill contracts.
Right.
And so if they can get the contract, boom.
Right.
They just build their company.
And they're hoping they can squeeze these things in under the radar and or have MPSC come in and say, I don't care what sort of zoning you have.
Why not wind? Did we go away from wind farms, or is that...
Well, so they're dismantling some the windmills up in Mackinac.
Really?
Yeah.
Sweet. Why?
I think because they're just inefficient. They were too much to maintain. I couldn't tell you exactly why, but
maybe there's a bigger contract to disassemble them than there was too.
There very well could be. But windmills are just as bad.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean,
they look awesome. No, I love them. I think it's so good. They look great.
Yeah.
They look great. No. Perfect.
So the landfills with blades being thrown in them.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
And by the way, windmills, I think, are the second largest polluter as far as CO2 emissions.
Oh my gosh.
For the amount of concrete and the amount of metal that go into building them. Right.
So dumb.
So when you look at, and I think the number one is hydroelectric dams because of the amount of concrete.
Yeah.
And people forget that it takes CO2 to mine and make concrete and all these other things, right? So there's great studies that have been done comparing the upfront amount of CO2 emissions to build one windmill, one average size dam, one nuclear facility, and one photovoltaic farm. And guess which one comes out ahead? Nuclear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
By far.
By far.
So this is where I'm saying I would rather have a nuclear power plant over in Hayes Township than a solar farm.
Or just recommission all the ones that would be decommissioned. Start that.
And I want somebody to make an argument against that. Because I can destroy any argument. And all I have to do is say, look at what France has done. France can build a nuclear reactor in 3 years.
Wow.
You know how long it takes us to do that here in the States?
What, 15?
12 to 16.
Jeez.
Again, you know why?
Regulation.
EPA, baby.
Yep.
Right? 100%. That's why it takes us longer to do all these things. Build bridges. I mean, that's why our infrastructure is dog shit.
Yeah.
Because of all these regulatory hoops to jump through. And I mean, the DNR even.
Dude.
You know, I mean, and so this is sort of, I wouldn't say I have a mission, but this is our lane, is when we see
I like it that way.
these
I like it
things that come along.
This is our lane.
And I want to be able to give the tools to another community or to another family that feels the same way that these families in Hayes Township feel. They feel like they've been duped.
Yeah.
And they feel like nobody is listening to them, especially their township
no one
supervisor.
cares. They don't care.
So if we can create a formula that can be turned out in Ogama or anywhere else, in Sheboygan or wherever, this is how you go after and change
you just
your
gave me
zoning.
So many ideas.
So that's
from like a
really
software
what we wanna
standpoint of like building something out that can scale, and that people who are in communities that have to wage this fight, whether it's against a school board, whether it's against anything, and to be able to give them the tools to do that, that'd be massive.
We did this for the mask mandates. So when we talked about Let Them Breathe a minute ago, that was one of 15 mask mandate cases, nearly all of which were not settled, but were basically thrown out within 12 days of the Iron Pig ruling. And the majority of it is because the mask mandates were rescinded, in some cases, the night before the hearings.
Jeez.
So don't tell me that the Iron Pig didn't have some kind of effect on anything.
Massive effect. Yeah.
So, but my point to that was what David was able to do with the Let Them Breathe and the arguments based on our Iron Pig arguments.
Yeah.
He was able to take an almost photocopy, and we had one person file, I think, 3 different suits, and each one of them in 3 different jurisdictions. That's what I want to be able to do is give people the weapons to at least fight back.
I'm literally writing this down on this podcast. I love that. Because actually,
like you said,
you and I haven't even talked about this before, and that's amazing.
Our legislators aren't doing anything. And
let's actually restate that. Let's give them a little bit of benefit now. Our legislators are trying to do things, but aren't able to. I think there's a mix. I think there's a mix of some of them are well-meaning and want to, but they haven't been able to.
I will go along with that slightly.
Okay.
Slightly. My own state representative promised to do something and never did anything. I think he's maybe been here in the restaurant 2 times in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's up for election again.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, these people did nothing. Now, you are right. For a majority of that time, they were not in a position of power necessarily to effectuate any of these things.
Yeah.
But I don't care.
I know.
That doesn't mean that you shouldn't introduce legislation.
But this goes
Michelle
back
Hoytanga did it.
This is why you can't be a politician. But
this is why I can't be a politician.
Yes, I agree.
But and to that point, in their defense, it's not supposed to be a easy and be quick. It was always intended to be a process to create law. Because you know what happens every time a law is created?
What?
It usually is some sort of restriction. Right?
Yeah, or response to restrict. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the more laws, generally, the fewer liberties we have.
Wow.
So when crafting a law that generally will take away a liberty, you want to be careful about it. And to my earlier point, you want to be awfully specific about it and not just say the health director may limit the gathering of people for any purpose.
Right. No, that's beautiful. Okay, last, because I want this soundbite, and I really want to get your take on it because it's hot in the news. But first, fantastic conversation. I've learned a bunch. Okay, we have the Olympics. We have this crazy opening ceremony. Obviously, there's the depiction of the Last Supper, the trans depiction of the Last Supper. Give me your quick minute take on that overarching. Obviously, it's huge right now in our news cycle. On conservative news cycle, it's big right now. When did you watch it live?
I did not.
Okay. When you rewatch it, what was your take?
Ridiculous theater.
Huh.
I don't know who they thought their audience was. They've explained their reasoning behind it.
Yeah. And defended.
And defended. Yeah. I think it is a disappointing distraction from worldwide competition that has been happening for centuries. I feel bad for the athletes.
Yeah.
They didn't have any decisions in this opening ceremony. People are boycotting.
Yeah.
Sponsors are pulling out. That I look at it from that point of view. If I worked my tail off so I played soccer when I was in high school and was mediocre at best, I would like to think. I still have my medals at home.
Hanging up. It's good.
Yeah. So, if I had worked my tail off to get into the, U.S. men's national team and then make it to the Olympic team or whatever it was, and then this sort of thing comes along. Yeah. I mean, it would just be kind of like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But at the same time, again, where have all the reasonable adults gone? I just don't think that these are serious people. And I think they're almost trying to be outrageous just for outrageous sake.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think this is sort of the epitome of the look at me mentality that social media has sort of brought about in our culture.
Yeah. A result of
how ridiculous can we make this thing? Let's have a woman singing headless, holding her own head.
Right.
Like it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's the theater of the absurd to me.
Yeah.
And again, I just don't know who they really thought their audience was, and I think they really missed their mark. But it's theirs to do what they want with.
Sure.
And to me, it's just another reason why, unfortunately, I don't really watch much major sports anymore.
Yeah.
Politics has come into it so much. Cultural identity has had to come into it so much.
Yeah.
Commercials. I don't want to see Paxlovid commercials every time between, breaks in a football game or whatever it is. That's why we keep the Food Network on here in the restaurant.
Yeah.
I mean, for other reasons, but
pretty soon your podcast is going to be streaming on there with
it should be. That's why I try not to curse too much anymore. Right. But yeah, I mean,
you actually just curse less. You curse less when when you and I are on.
There's probably I probably do that on purpose. Yeah.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Nah, well, I think it's an overarching theme.
That's hilarious.
Trying to be less vulgar, maybe, but sometimes
no. There's a difference between vulgar and then using language that's appropriate for the situation. Sometimes cursing is because sometimes it's hard to get the point across, and then other times it's like there's something to be told to be able to describe something without cursing, because then you actually use more sophisticated language, and
that's absolutely
it can come across better.
Yeah, well, I mean, if every other word out of your mouth is fuck, shit, ass, in
that order.
I think Andrew Dice Clay did some great jokes about it back in the day, but it's sort of loses its,
It does. It does. I agree.
Thing after a while.
Okay, well, that was a good take. I like it. I think the only thing I would put on top of that, I mean, everybody, the Catholic Church and then many other people have come out just saying they're against it, which I think it's maybe different now. I think I think the thing I've liked about this is more people are willing to be vocal.
Yeah.
Rather than just sit aside. And I was having this discussion the other day with a friend of mine about kind of that idea, why aren't more good people doing things? And I was like, well, think about it. I'm going to go.
I know the answer to that question.
I'm going to give an anecdotal response to that. The anecdotal response, what I would say is, well, the good people have this entire country on their backs because they're working their tails off. Okay. And there's a threshold where they're like, well, I only have so much time, right? There's only so much time in a day. Right? Why aren't all the men at the school board meetings? Well, hopefully the good men are all working, trying to support their families and dealing with all the crap that actually also happens in life, right? And not saying women aren't working too. Women are working as well. But there's a capacity issue in a human's life where you only have so much capacity to care about so many things, right? Because there's also all these other things happening in your life, whether they're family or health related or whatever.
Right.
But what is the tipping point, right? And I don't think we've seen it, but we're starting to see it. I think we're starting to see a tipping point where the people who just, for the sake of like, I've got all these other things I have to do and I have to do them. I don't have the emotional, the mental capacity to deal with this over here.
Yeah.
Right? Because I have to do X, Y, and Z. And finally, X, Y, and Z are becoming so pronounced that's like, okay, I guess I have to jump into this arena, right? I ultimately think that's a good thing, right? And
yeah, I do too.
And I think you're seeing, like, I know for even myself personally, you're married and you have to also think about your spouse, and you have discussions with your spouse about, okay, what are you going to talk about? What are we going to spend our time on? And all of a sudden when your spouse nudges you, I'm like, you got to talk about this. You got to do something, right? It's like, all right, let's go, game on, right? So anyway, I think some of this stuff, when there's something so blatant, and I think one of the things we can take from what happened in Paris, it's just as simple. When the opportunity is given to that community, there is nothing sacred, right? They will go full tilt, right? Full tilt. Jillian Michaels, the famous trainer, what is it? The weight loss show.
Yeah.
Whatever that was. Biggest Loser. Okay. She's gay. Okay. She's a lesbian, but she came out very vehemently opposed to, and they're like, come on, don't go so far on this. Aren't we trying to? But for the most part, I think that community is saying, no, if we have the opportunity, we're going to go to the nth degree to make our point. And so all that to say, I think the problem is be careful, because you're going to awake a sleeping giant. That's actually the reason you're allowed to have this opinion. Right. That's actually giving you the opportunity for the ability to do this, and is doing most of the work in this country. And when you awaken that giant, I think there's going to be a reaction that you probably, I'm just throwing that out there. It's interesting. It's interesting to see what's happening right now.
I've seen that conversation, and I'm seeing other Christians saying, when is it going to be enough? When are you going to stand up for your faith? You're being called a white Christian nationalist or what. I was like, why is that being used as a weapon against you, and why are you allowing it?
Yeah.
And I understand that tipping point.
Yeah. You do more than most.
100%. Yeah.
Because they hit you.
And it has been said about me before that I don't suffer fools lightly. And I agree with that 110%, and maybe to a fault sometimes.
Yeah.
But did you just agree? I'm just saying. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Everything is fascinating these days. But that tipping point mentality, you're right. I think that, and I love to see it, even in the smallest smallest of forms, when not necessarily a bullying situation, but when somebody is, poking at somebody and they finally just say, you know what, stop.
Yep.
Something even as small as that
Yep.
can be, I wouldn't say life-changing, but really could be.
It can be. And here's an example. I think Enid's example, we'll close on this. When that happens and when you say stop, oftentimes we all think about that in grandiose scales because you see the end of it, right?
Mhm.
Your beginning in this didn't start on some grandiose end your beginning to this just was simply in the domain of what you were in charge of.
Mhm.
And I think that's the key takeaway is to stick in your domain. And when this enters in your domain, be sure, when I say this, it's such an abstract, when something enters your domain that you know is intrinsically wrong and you have the ability to stand up, it now becomes important, and you don't have to feel like you have to have the answer for what the end looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You just simply have to have the answer for the next step for what's in front of you.
That's
and
so
I think
true.
that's the biggest thing in life, because I think so many people, whether you're young and old, kind of sit back and you're consuming all of this, right? And you're spectators. But actually the reality is you're not spectators. You have a job. You have a thing in front of you. Whatever God has given you, whether small or big, it doesn't even matter. That is your garden. That is the thing you are to tend to. And if I could have one bit, when a kid who's 20 years old, like, oh, what do I do in life? Like, I don't know. It's like, actually you do. You have a little garden right now.
Tend to it.
Tend to that garden. And if something comes to try to attack that garden, defend that garden.
Right.
Don't get so caught up with everything else going around. You can, to inform you, so you're informed, so you understand what's going on. But don't you let go of that garden you're given.
Right.
And that's yours.
Yep.
And I think that's the big takeaway for me. And I love seeing that because that's exactly how you got to the point where you're at today.
Yeah.
That's
I would
huge.
agree. Yeah. It's okay.
I love it.
It's okay to stand on your principles.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's okay.
dude. Good
It's okay
stuff.
to let people know.
That's good stuff. All right, brother.
All right, man.
This was good.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, we're going to, we'll see. We need to ramp stuff up.
Lots
going on.
Right. Exactly. As usual, you can always find out more fuelcasttv.com, riskitforthebrisket.com, ironpigmerch.com for all of the good stuff like this.
When you get it, you support what's going on too.
That's right. Exactly. Barbecue sauces, rubs, all that stuff. Any information about the restaurant, ironpigsmoke.com. We got a brand new catering platform there. Check it out. Thank you guys. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate you.
Anytime.
Great conversations always. Like, subscribe, drop comments in the comments below. Blah, 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 blah. Thanks. See ya.
Beautiful.